So good morning, everyone. Continuing our study of the Middle-Length Lamrim by Lama Tsongkhapa. So after the prayers, we'll just do a little bit of meditation on something we're looking at. It's from the last class. That was in February, late February, so quite a while ago. Okay, so while doing the prayers, if you can, imagine the Buddha in front. You can imagine many Buddhas, objects of refuge if you wish, or just the one figure of the Buddha embodying all the other objects of refuge. And then direct the prayers to the Buddha, generating bodhicitta, taking refuge and generating bodhicitta. And have that as your reason, your motivation for being here, participating in this class.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, one thus gone, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, knower of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed. Teacher of gods and humans to you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain. Fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme science, face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great, compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the 4 faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn, Mount Meru, 4 lands, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhist, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhist, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
So take a few minutes to make sure that you're settled down, your body in a good position for meditation, your mind not thinking about other things, past or future or other places, but right here, focused on what we're doing. So for the meditation, we're in the section of the text on the great scope, which is all about how to generate bodhicitta, the aspiration to become a Buddha for the benefit of all beings, and then follow the bodhisattva's path leading to Buddhahood. And we're just going through a part of the text that talks about things we need to do in order to make sure that we don't lose bodhicitta in this lifetime, and also to not be separated from bodhicitta in future lives as well. So spend some time thinking about how that would be if, and we all heard the teachings, listened to the teachings on bodhicitta, the bodhisattva's path, and we're inspired by that, and we're really doing our best to cultivate bodhicitta and do everything we do with that motivation. So try to imagine how it would be if your bodhicitta were to degenerate. If things were to happen in this lifetime and you lose that aspiration to become a Buddha, that enthusiasm to develop yourself towards enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. So try to imagine what might cause that to degenerate and what that would be like if it did degenerate. So hopefully we can see the undesirability of losing our bodhicitta in this life and wish to do whatever we can to ensure that that doesn't happen. And another danger is being separated from bodhicitta in future lives, like being born in a situation where we wouldn't have the ideal conditions to be able to learn about bodhicitta and meditate on it, practice it, and continue following the path to Buddhahood. So try to imagine what that would be like, being separated from the conditions for generating bodhicitta in future lives. So if you're able to clearly see the disadvantages of losing bodhicitta in this life, or not meeting with the conditions to continue practicing it in future lives, then hopefully you'll appreciate the importance of doing these things now to ensure that our bodhicitta doesn't degenerate in this life or future lives. So where we left off last time was page 227. So we're kind of partway through this chapter, chapter 17, which is called Guarding One's Bodhicitta. And in the last class, back at the end of February, we went through this section on training and abandoning the 4 non-virtuous practices that cause bodhicitta to degenerate. And we finished that section, but there was some confusion, my fault, about the terms. There were these 2 terms that appeared several times in this section, deceit and shiftiness. And so I wanted to clarify that. So the confusion happened because I know that these two are mental factors. They're secondary afflictions, also called auxiliary afflictions. And I looked them up in volume 3, Samsara, Nirvana, Buddha Nature, just to see what that book said about them. And I saw the term deceit in volume 3, and I just assumed it was the same as deceit here in this book. So but it's not. So I checked more carefully afterwards. I looked both in more carefully at Samsara, Nirvana, Buddha Nature, and also Meditation on Emptiness, Jeffrey's book, because there he has all the mental factors, and he has both the Sanskrit and the Tibetan terms for these. It's always good to be able to go back to those terms because different writers and translators use the same English, use different English terms for the same Sanskrit and Tibetan term. So here's just an explanation of these terms. So what's called deceit here in this book, the Sanskrit is Maya and Tibetan is Gyu. So this is a secondary or auxiliary affliction. And it's when we pretend to have good qualities that we don't have, motivated by attachment to respect or material gain. So we want people to respect us, or we want people to give us things, and so we pretend to be something we're not. So that's what's called deceit in this book, but in Samsara, Nirvana, Buddha Nature, it's called pretension. Venerable Sepo, I think, pointed out that Venerable Chudun changed the terms to make them more like how we normally use them. And then what's called shiftiness here in this book, the Sanskrit is satya and Tibetan is yo. This is also a secondary affliction, and it's when we hide our faults out of attachment to respect and material gains. So again, wanting people to respect us or give us things, then we hide faults that we have, pretend we don't have them. So in this book, this is called shiftiness, but in Samsara, Nirvana, Buddha Nature, it's called deceit. So you see how it can be confusing. If you just look at the English terms in different books and you assume, oh, they're talking about the same thing, but they may not be. And so it's good to be aware of that and check more carefully. I should have done that last time. But the problem is in Samsara, Nirvana, Buddha Nature, it only gives the Sanskrit terms for these mental factors. It doesn't give the Tibetan. And I'm not familiar with the Sanskrit. I'm familiar with the Tibetan. But Jeffrey's book does give both. So you can look at that and compare. Anyway, the important thing is to understand these two mental factors and then be on the lookout for them in your experience. And if you notice them happening, try to avoid them, try to reduce them, because they can endanger our bodhicitta. Here it's said they will endanger bodhicitta in future lives, not having the conditions to be able to continue developing bodhicitta in future lives. But they can also cause problems in this lifetime, weaken and pollute our bodhicitta. So we should look out for these and try to avoid them. Both of them are related to ignorance about the true nature of things, but also attachment and 8 worldly concerns, right? Wanting to be respected, wanting material gain. So then behaving deceptively. Is that clear? Okay, so let's continue. So we're on page 227, towards the top of the page, a new section called Training and Adopting the 4 Virtuous Practices that do not allow it to degenerate. So we looked at 4 non-virtuous practices we should try to avoid. And then these 4 virtuous practices are the opposite to the 4 non-virtues, but the order is a little different. Okay, so reading from the text. It says, the object of the first virtuous practice. So this text doesn't actually enumerate clearly what they are. So I made this slide. So the first of the 4 virtuous practices is to eliminate lying to sentient beings, even for the sake of your life or as a joke. So he says the object of the first virtuous practice is all sentient beings. The action is to eliminate knowingly lying to them, even for the sake of one's life or for as little as a joke. If you act in this way, you will be sure not to cheat special objects such as your abbot, master, and so forth through lies. So, so this one is the opposite to the first of the 4 non-virtuous practices, and that one was deceiving your abbot, your master, guru, or those worthy of offerings. So lying to gurus and so forth. And so if you're practicing this one, you're not lying to anybody. And of course, you wouldn't lie to your spiritual teachers, your abbot, and so forth. And it says, even as a joke, so that's kind of tricky because Tibetan teachers, I don't know about other traditions, but Tibetan teachers often tell jokes, right? And they'll sometimes make sarcastic remarks, which, in both cases, these remarks might be saying something that isn't completely true. And I'm sure their motivation is positive. They're trying to lighten the mood, get people to laugh, or drive home a point. But it can confuse people. Not everybody realizes this is a joke, right? This is sarcasm, and they can get confused. So what I try to do when I'm making those kind of comments is to immediately say, I'm joking, in case there's any confusion. So I hope that helps. But maybe not all jokes are things that are untrue, right? Or maybe some, they're so exaggerated that it's kind of obvious that, like saying, oh, I just saw a dinosaur walk up the road, it's like, probably nobody would really believe that. But anyway, that's something to be careful of, to try to be truthful. Okay, then second, so the object of the second virtuous practice is all sentient beings. The action is to abide with the extraordinary attitude toward them without deceit or shiftiness, that is, to abide with an honest attitude. It is the antidote to the 4th non-virtuous practice. So the 4th non-virtuous action that we need to avoid is acting out of deceit and shiftiness, and instead try to act with a noble attitude. So on the screen, I put noble attitude instead of extraordinary attitude, because in the book it says extraordinary attitude, and that sounds like number 6 of the 7-fold cause and effect method for developing bodhicitta. But Geshe Zopa says it doesn't mean that. It's not that attitude. Instead, it's just being straightforward, earnest, and pure in our dealings with others. And not pretending to be something we're not, also not hiding our faults because of wanting respect or material gain. So trying to avoid those 2 mental factors of deceit and shiftiness. So I was thinking that, there may be other reasons we might have for hiding our faults, like we don't want to hurt somebody. We're really angry at somebody. I mean, we have thoughts of doing something or saying something hurtful, but we, hide that because we don't want to hurt them. So, I think the motivation there may not be out of desire for respect or material gain, but we just don't want to hurt that person, right? Or also as monastics, we're walking advertisements for Buddhism, and so everything we do, people are going to look at, and so not wanting people to lose faith in the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha, then we might, hide some faults that we have. So again, that's, I think that's a good motivation, a good reason to hide faults. It isn't just self-centered and worldly, caught up with worldly dharmas. But as long as we're honest with ourselves, that we are fully aware that we do have that fault, and also with our teachers, we're, willing to reveal those faults to them, but just not wanting to hang our dirty laundry out for everybody to see. Yeah? So what do you think? Does that sound reasonable? Because many of the precepts that we have as monastics are related to lay people, how lay Buddhists feel. And if we behave in ways that could cause them to lose respect, they could just completely give up altogether, give up their respect, their faith in Buddhism, and walk away if we act in certain ways. So out of that reason, out of that motivation, I would think it's not going against this. Yoshika, did you have a comment?
Thank you. So my question is, are there any action, because it seems like motivation is a big part of it. Are there any actions that are negative, regardless if the motivation is virtuous or non-virtuous, just that action in and of itself is negative?
Are there actions that are negative regardless of motivation? Well, it's kind of hard to say. I mean, the first thing that pops into my mind is killing. Yeah, that's a pretty negative action, destroying the life of another being. But they do say that, yeah, if your motivation is totally selfless and compassionate, like the story of a Buddha in a previous life where he killed one person to save the lives of many others, but his motive, there was no hatred, no anger, no negative motivation. It was just compassion. But that's hard, and probably hard for us. I mean, hard for me to have such a pure motivation.
So is it simply, because that's what I'm wondering, like the motivation was pure, and they accepted taking on the negative karma for that action, but having an intention that pure, will you accept that that might be a naturally negative action? Does that in and of itself kind of eliminate the negativity, or it's just, yes, there's going to be negative karma due to this action, and you're accepting to take this on as a bodhisattva type deal?
Yeah, I mean, right now I can't think of any action that would always be negative 100% of the time, no matter what your motivation is. Anyone else think of anything like that? I mean, usually they do say.
Does that kind of speak to maybe the emptiness of the certain action thing? Oh, don't worry, I'm not going to kill anybody though.
Well, they have those naturally not negative actions. That's like
Killing
a
is
category of
Yeah.
things, actions. So to me, I always concluded that you will have negative karma if you do those actions, even if you have a good intention.
Yeah, so killing is one of those naturally negative actions, but there is that story about a previous life of the Buddha where he did do an act of killing with
He went to
no
hell,
negative.
though.
No, I don't think so. He did? Huh? He went to hell?
I heard that he went and bounced out.
Oh, bounced back.
Yeah. So
So there was a little bit of negativity, but not much. Yeah. I was thinking too, those 5 extreme negative actions, 5 actions of immediate retribution, killing your mother, killing your father, and so on. So I haven't heard of any cases of those being done with a virtuous motivation, but it's possible. Yeah. I mean, if your mother was about to do something really, really, really horrible that would cause a huge amount of suffering, and you saw no way out, no way to stop her other than to kill her. But if your motivation was completely pure, there probably would be some negativity, but yeah. Yeah, but yeah, there are these actions that are said to be naturally negative. So even for animals, for example, and babies, if they do those actions, then those are non-virtuous, like killing. So even, a tiger kills out of instinct, hunger, and they don't know about karma. They don't realize this is bad karma, but they're still creating negative karma.
But it still requires the intention. You could accidentally even kill your mother, which would be a horrible thing to do, but it does require the intent to kill.
Yeah. Well, to be a complete act of killing, yeah, you would need all those branches. But even if some of those branches are missing, there's still some negativity, like killing accidentally. It still brings there's still some negativity. Huh? Yeah.
Stepping on a bug, for example?
Yeah.
Oh,
We are causing suffering to a being. So
yeah, you are.
yeah, so that's why we try to remember those actions and purify them. Okay, karma is complicated. Okay, then next is the third. The object of the third virtuous practice is all bodhisattvas. The action is to generate the perception of them as resembling the teacher, Buddha, and to proclaim truthful praise about them in the 4 directions. Sharawa said that although we have created a little bit of something like virtue, there is no sign of its increase and many signs of its exhaustion. Virtue is exhausted through hatred, disdain, and offense toward bodhisattvas and our companions. Therefore, if we are able to eliminate offending our companions and bodhisattvas, we will no longer experience what is referred to in the compendium of trainings as harm based on persons. And I think in the Geshe-Zopa's commentary, some commentary said that phrase, harm based on persons, is referring to negative actions that destroy merit. Since we do not know in whom bodhicitta is present, we act from the perspective of training in pure appearances, generating the perception of all sentient beings as the teacher, in accordance with the Kashyapa chapter. So, to be on the safe side, it's good to apply this to all sentient beings, because you don't know who's a bodhisattva and who isn't. So if we can try to see all sentient beings as our teacher and not say anything negative about them, but instead praise them, then we're able to keep this one. If there is an audience and an opportunity to express their excellent qualities, do so. However, if you do not go to all 4 directions and proclaim them, this is not a fault. So, yeah, I mean, if we thought that, taking this literally and thinking, oh, we have to be proclaiming the good qualities of all sentient beings, seeing them as Buddhas, then we could be very busy, going to all the 4 directions, north, south, east, west, and doing that. But yeah, that would take up a lot of our time, and we wouldn't have time to do much else. So Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, we don't have to be doing this all the time. So this virtuous practice is the antidote to the 3rd non-virtuous practice. So the 3rd non-virtuous practice was saying something unpleasant about a bodhisattva motivated by hatred. So the motivation is hatred. Okay, then 4th one, the objects of the 4th virtuous practice are the sentient beings who are ripened by you. That means like if you're a teacher, you have disciples or other people that you are in a position of helping them to learn the Dharma, to practice the Dharma, then those would be the objects. And the action is to cause them to hold to complete enlightenment without wishing for a temporary vehicle. Temporary vehicle meaning like the fundamental vehicle that leads to nirvana, self-liberation, but that's not really the final goal. The final goal is Buddhahood. So the idea here is to help these beings who are dependent on us to learn the Dharma to follow the Mahayana path. And in the Pearl of Wisdom, when they mention these 4 virtuous actions, it says all sentient beings. We have to help all sentient beings follow the Mahayana. But Lama Tsongkhapa doesn't say that. He just says those who are ripened by you, those who are dependent on you, which kind of makes sense. I mean, we can't really expect ourselves to get all sentient beings in the universe onto the Mahayana path, although that is our goal eventually. But to think we have to do that now is kind of unrealistic. So it's mainly about those that we are connected with in this life, in the situation of teaching, or maybe not even if you're not a teacher, but just you're helping them learn meditation, or like here people who come to the Abbey, guests who come to the Abbey and they're trying to learn the Dharma, so we do have some kind of responsibility to help them. So trying to help them to follow the Mahayana, aspire for enlightenment. And then he says, moreover, while from your side you should cause your disciple to make a connection with it, Mahayana, if that thought does not arise in the disciple, it does not become a fault because you were unable to accomplish it. So, if we try to get people to follow the Mahayana, but they say, no thanks, that's not for me, and maybe they choose another path, it's not our fault. We don't have a fault if that happens. By means of this virtuous practice, you abandon the 2nd non-virtuous practice. So the 2nd non-virtuous practice, what was that? That was causing others to regret virtues that they do not regret. So if we do this 4th virtuous practice, he says, if you wish from the depths of your heart to establish others in the ultimate of all types of happiness, you would not do something to cause them to give rise to mental unhappiness so that they give rise to regret, that is itself mental unhappiness. So if we're keeping this virtuous practice of trying to help all sentient beings get on the path to enlightenment and attain enlightenment, then we wouldn't cause anybody to regret some virtue, because we know that they need to create a lot of virtue to be able to follow the path and attain enlightenment. So it just wouldn't happen that we would cause someone to regret a virtuous action. Okay, then The Questions of a Lion Sutra says, by what means is bodhicitta not given up in all one's lives, not even in one's dreams, much less while one is not asleep? He spoke, in cities or in villages, in the countries where you live, guide others correctly to enlightenment. Through that, bodhicitta will not be abandoned. So if we really have bodhicitta to the best of our ability, that is, we want all living beings to be free of all their sufferings and causes of suffering, and we want them all eventually to reach full enlightenment. So if we see that as our goal and we're working towards that, then naturally we would be helping others, encouraging others in a skillful way, not pushing them, proselytizing and so on, but in a skillful way, trying to encourage people to follow this path as well. And so in that way, by practicing that way, living that way, our bodhicitta will be preserved and we won't lose it, won't give it up. Furthermore, array of qualities in Manjushri's Buddha field teaches that the aspiration is not abandoned if one possesses 4 qualities: having abandoned pride, having abandoned jealousy, having abandoned miserliness, and being mentally joyful when seeing others' wealth. So instead of being jealous of other people's wealth, being joyful, rejoicing that they have such good experiences. So these afflictions, pride, jealousy, and miserliness, these are all coming from self-centeredness, the self-centered attitude. And so if we're working on overcoming those, abandoning those afflictions, then that will also help us maintain our bodhicitta. The Cloud of Jewels Sutra clearly teaches that if you train in bodhicitta in all behaviors and generate bodhicitta before starting any virtuous activity, you will not be separated from this precious mind in other lives either. As it is said, if a person investigates time and time again. So the lifestyle here at the Abbey, we have a lot of ways to keep bodhicitta in mind. First thing in the morning and numerous times during the day. So, if we follow the schedule, the program, do all the prayers and so on, then this is really helping us to maintain our bodhicitta numerous times a day and making it less likely we would lose it or be separated from it in future lives. So, repetition and familiarity, these are really, really important. That's what the last little quote means, investigating time and time again. So just bringing to mind our motivation, why we're doing the things that we do, why we are wearing these robes, keeping precepts and so on. And doing practices, offering service, eating, sleeping. So just reminding ourselves again and again of bodhicitta. So that will help us preserve it, maintain it. Okay, so then the next section is the method for restoring it if it has degenerated. If you transgress the precepts, and what it means here is the precepts of aspiring bodhicitta, other than giving up the aspiring mind and mentally giving up sentient beings, there is no infraction from the point of view of a bodhisattva as long as you do not have bodhisattva vows. However, since it transgresses the precept of promising virtue in the interim, it becomes faulty conduct and therefore should be confessed by means of the 4 powers. So I didn't find this paragraph very clear. So I looked at the Lamrim Chenmo, the longer version of this text, and also Geshe Zopa's commentary in the Steps, what is it, Steps on the Path to Enlightenment, Volume 3. And so Geshe Zopa says this section is talking about the parameters of the precepts of aspirational bodhicitta, how they might be transgressed. So earlier in this chapter, we went through the precepts of aspiring bodhicitta. There were like 4, back on page 221, 4 things we need to do to make sure that our bodhicitta doesn't degenerate in this lifetime. And then 2 sets of 4 things to make sure we don't separate it from it in future lives, for negative actions to give up, for virtuous actions to practice. So those are the precepts of aspiring bodhicitta. So that's what's being talked about here. It's not talking about the bodhisattva vow with 18 root vows and so on. So just these precepts of aspiring bodhicitta. And so, how are they transgressed? Yeah, those precepts. And in the bigger book, the Lamrim Chenmo, Lama Tsongkhapa mentions some views of other scholars. He doesn't mention names, but he just says, some scholars say da-da-da-da-da, and he disagrees with what they say. So one of the things they say is that if you commit some transgression, and then after a certain period of time has passed, then it becomes a transgression. So there's a time period before it actually becomes a transgression. But Lama Tsongkhapa disagrees with that, and his view is that, for example, as soon as you think, I can't attain enlightenment, then you have abandoned aspiring bodhicitta. So as soon as that thought, you don't need a time gap, but as soon as you think, I can't do it, I can't become a Buddha, I can't attain enlightenment, then you have abandoned aspiring bodhicitta. And he also says another way that aspiring bodhicitta can be abandoned is by giving up sentient beings, which he mentions here, mentally giving up sentient beings. So that would be like thinking, oh, there's so many sentient beings, I can't possibly help all of them. So you sort of give up this aspiration, this wish to help all sentient beings without exception. But also even giving up one sentient being. Now, if there's one sentient being you find just too difficult, I can't, I'm happy to help everybody else, attain enlightenment, and help all these other sentient beings, but not that one. So you kind of shut that one out of your bodhicitta. So that's another way that you lose aspiring bodhicitta. And so, so Lama Tsongkhapa says if either of those cases happen, you either give up, wishing to attain enlightenment, or you give up sentient beings, or even one sentient being, then you've lost your aspiring bodhicitta. And it doesn't really say, I would imagine you can retake it. I mean, you can do that with the bodhisattva vow. That's not like you've lost it forever and you can never retake it. So I think you have to go through a ceremony and retake aspiring bodhicitta. But then what he's also saying here is, so if you are someone who hasn't yet taken the bodhisattva vow, that means the 18 root and 46 secondary. Those are the vows of engaging bodhicitta. So if you haven't taken those, you're just on the level of aspiring bodhicitta. And if you transgress any of the precepts other than those 2, giving up aspiring bodhicitta or mentally giving up sentient beings, any of the others that you might transgress, Lama Tsongkhapa says, there's no bodhisattva infraction or transgression, but you do transgress the precept of promising virtue in the interim. So what that means is, back on page 225, so one of the precepts for, it's the fourth precept, to not degenerate bodhicitta in this life. It's training and accumulating the collections of merit and wisdom. Okay, so that's one of the things that it's a precept that we have. We have to accumulate merit and wisdom. And so he's saying, yeah, if you transgress any of the other precepts, you are transgressing that one. You are not creating virtue in the interim. And then the interim means from, until the time you take the bodhisattva vow. So while you're still on the level of having aspiring bodhicitta and keeping those precepts, up to the time when you've taken the full bodhisattva vow, we should be accumulating virtue. And so if you're transgressing any of the other precepts of aspiring bodhicitta, you're not keeping that one, because you're not creating virtue, and maybe you're even creating non-virtue. So like, for example, these 4 non-virtuous practices, if we're doing those, then we're not really keeping to our promise of aspiring bodhicitta. Does that make sense? And so he says, if that's the case, if we have done any of the other precepts, broken any of the other precepts, then we need to confess it and use the 4 opponent powers. So do a purification practice with the 4 opponent powers. So that's what I understand from that section. And he also, in the Lamrim Chenmo, Lama Tsongkhapa says that doing any of the 4 non-virtuous practices, the ones we went through last time, those 4 non-virtues, it isn't a cause of giving up bodhicitta. So doing any of those, we're not losing our bodhicitta. But since they are the cause of not having bodhicitta in future lives, being separated from bodhicitta in our future lives, we should stop them. And they also weaken our bodhicitta in this life. Does that make sense? It's a little complicated, but anyway, these are just explaining how to make sure we don't lose our aspiring bodhicitta in this lifetime, and how to make sure that we will continue having all the conditions for generating bodhicitta and practicing the bodhisattva path in future lives as well.
This might be a dumb question, but does even just getting angry at someone and thinking, I don't like them, count as losing your bodhicitta aspiration? Because that happens to me all the time.
I don't think so. I don't think so. Yeah. I think you have to go further than that. You have to actually think, I am not going to help this person. I'm not going to become enlightened for this person's benefit and lead them to enlightenment as well. So I think you have to go pretty far with But still good to be careful. Like, if you don't do something about that anger, it could increase and turn into that.
I had a couple questions from the previous slide. Is it okay to go back now? Mm-hmm. This last one, it sounds to me like the bodhisattva can only encourage the bodhisattva path to people.
Well, I don't think so, because, when I was studying in the master's program, studying the ornament for clear realizations, it talks about how, someone on the bodhisattva path needs to be thoroughly familiar with all of the 3 vehicles, the Shravaka vehicle, the Pratyeka Buddha vehicle. You have to know those paths, and not just know them intellectually, but practice them. because you have to be able to lead people who are suitable disciples for those vehicles, lead them to their respective goals. So, there are people who are just meant to be hearers, Shravakas. So you have to know how to lead them, like the Buddha did, okay? Buddha didn't tell everybody to follow Mahayana, so he knew there were some disciples who were, suitable for the hearer path, and others who were suitable for the Pratyeka Buddha path. So he led them accordingly. So we have to develop that ability as well. But I guess as you develop your mind and on the Bodhisattva's path, you also develop certain like clairvoyant abilities where you can look into people's minds and recognize what kind of person they are, and then you would be able to teach them accordingly. So it doesn't mean that you're only teaching Mahayana to everybody and trying to get everybody you meet to follow the Mahayana. But yeah, I guess like here in the Abbey, we are trying our best to follow the Mahayana path. We're studying the Mahayana teachings, developing bodhicitta, doing those practices that are part of Mahayana. And everybody who comes here is also encouraged to do the same. And they probably have some connection or some affinity with the Mahayana path. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here. They'd be at another Dharma center, which is teaching another path. Or they might come and listen for a while and say, no, this isn't for me. I need to keep searching elsewhere. So here, I think, our practice is mainly to encourage people to follow the Mahayana path. But if people, any individuals say, no, this isn't for me, we're not going to make them feel bad and push them. No, you should do what we're doing. So we have respect for all the different paths within Buddhism, but also different religions in the world. Yeah, so we encourage people accordingly. Is that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Thank you. I remember in the Brahma's Net Sutra that was at the full ordination, it included some precepts saying that you shouldn't teach the fundamental vehicle path. And I really was surprised by that. I don't know if anyone else remembers that, but I was a little bit, because it made it seem like a really heavy negative thing, like you can only teach the bodhisattva path, promote it. But my other question was about lying for this to save your life. Else in other ethical conduct texts and Lamrim teachings, it says it's okay to protect the life of another to lie, like a hunter comes looking for the deer. But in this case, could one make the argument or whatever justification that if you're practicing ethical conduct, you're trying to develop bodhicitta, couldn't you save your own life by telling a minor lie so that you can continue to have your precious human life?
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. I remember it makes me think of when I was a child growing up in Catholicism, and we would read these stories or hear these stories about the martyrs, and they were often given the choice: give up Christianity or lose your life. We're going to kill you. And many of them said, no, I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to give up. And then they were killed in some usually horrible way. And so this is held up as the ideal. And I used to think, I would just say, okay, I give up. But in my heart, I know I'm not. And then as soon as I can get away, then I go back to being a Christian. I thought, well, what's wrong with telling a little lie just to save my life? I know in my heart it's not true, but it's just so that's how I used to think. So it's kind of similar. If you're just trying to save your life and you tell some little lie, I don't know. Difficult to say, because you can purify. Yeah, we can always do confession and purification, go to our teacher and say, I'm sorry I told this lie, but I just didn't want to die. I just don't feel ready right now to die, losing my precious human life, and who knows where I would go after this. So I don't know. Anyone else heard anything about that? Venerable children ever talk about that?
My memory of that section in the Lamrim is that it doesn't say lie, it says change the subject.
Yeah,
Remember?
yeah, that's what Pabonka Rinpoche says. Just distract the person and say, say something to distract them. But you don't actually have to tell an outright lie. With the thing about the hunter and the deer. But has this ever come up, this topic ever come up with Venerable children? Lying to save your life?
I did read something by Lama Yeshe. He said it's better, it's better to give up your life than to lie. And I was like, whoa. I don't know which book, but I remember that. But they say, don't feed yourself to a tiger if you're not an Arya yet, because you don't know where your next rebirth will be. So along those lines, I could think, it's maybe a little bit dangerous to not lie if you're not sure where you're going to be reborn.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how strongly you feel about your precepts. And if you think, I have taken these precepts, I made these promises to the Buddha, and if I go against them, if I break them, then it's creating negative karma. So it's better to die with a pure mind, not having, broken my precepts. Better to die than to live with broken precepts. So I suppose some would think that way and think it's better not to tell a lie. So I sometimes wonder, what would I do in that kind of situation? Difficult to know.
I think it's in the Venerable Palden Gyatso's autobiography. I think he was asked to denounce his teacher, and he's like, never, because this is a karmic relationship. He can't live with that kind of karmic result. So he said no, and then they basically tortured him quite horrifically after that. And he hung in there. I remember reading that thinking, whew, would I have the courage to say no? Yeah. But you also don't want to get your teacher in trouble, because if you denounce your teacher to the communists, and then it's a really horrible outcome. Yeah.
I heard another story similar to that. I think there was a whole group of monks in a monastery, and they were going through one of these, what do they call them, these sessions? Struggle sessions. And so the communist, I don't know, police or army or whatever, were asking all the monks to denounce Trichang Rinpoche, the junior tutor of His Holiness. And most of the monks were doing it. They were saying negative things about Trichang Rinpoche. But one monk said, no, I am not going to do that. I refuse to do that. And he was just very adamant about it. And all the other monks started beating him up. And he died. He actually died as a result of that. But he died with a blissful mind because, he had kept his devotion and his commitment to having respect for his teacher, not saying anything negative about his teacher. So, yeah.
It's up in my memory, but isn't there a verse in the Lama Tsongkhapa that says, do not denounce or do not give up even at the cost of your life? Do not give up. I mean, so how we can interpret that the renunciation right? I mean, you have to think about it. I can't remember the exact words of the verse. I don't know if anybody has it handy, but I think we pretty much
Is it about ethics, related to ethics? I will not give up.
Well, I will not transgress the boundaries. With that one, we don't give it the cost of my life. But the Lama Tsongkhapa one I'm thinking of is, I will not abandon the bodhicitta, or I will not abandon the three jewels, even at the cost of my life.
Yeah. Tough. Rashika.
I can't remember exactly what verse it is, I could be wrong, but I think the Buddha had said like lying is one of the worst things you can do. And I'm just guessing, but from what I understand, it's because lying can lead to other things to you to protect that lie. It's like a gateway. If you lie to somebody about something and they find out, oh, I'm gonna tell on you and you'll go to prison, it could lead to killing. So it's like an avenue to so many other non-virtuous things to either protect that lie or, and plus it's like repetitive. You need to cover up the lie with another lie. But the one thing I was gonna say, I'm not sure about the precepts, but you were saying teaching in the Mahayana, in the Bodhisattva vows that I take, it says basically, do not cause someone to give up the path of individual liberation, their own liberation, to go to the Mahayana. And let's see, what does it said? There's another, so yeah, don't try to get people to give up their view to the Mahayana. So I think that's kind of, and don't teach, sorry, I'm trying to get it unconfused in my head, but it's like, do not cause someone to give up their principal study to go to the Mahayana. So it's not like you can't teach the Mahayana, you're just not telling them to leave their path of liberation completely, to give up, to go to the Mahayana. But you're also not encouraging them, if they've taken on the Mahayana path, to give up the Mahayana path and go simply for their own liberation. I think that's kind of, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm looking at the 18
Yeah, I think it's page
precepts.
74.
So number 12 says, causing those who have entered the Mahayana to turn away from working for the full awakening of Buddhahood and encouraging them to work merely for their own liberation from suffering. So we shouldn't encourage anyone to give up Mahayana and follow the path to individual liberation. But then number 13 says, causing others to abandon completely their precepts of self-liberation. So that means the pratimoksha precepts. So
'cause I wondered if that
encouraging
was
someone to stop, for example, give up their monastic precepts, and saying, oh, just practice Mahayana. I don't know what kind of situations there would be one would do that, but anyway, we're not
Yeah,
supposed to.
no. So that's what I was wondering, if that's kind of like the technicality where you're not necessarily teaching anything outside of the Mahayana, I guess. But I do know as a bodhisattva, like you say, you need to be well versed in all. Thanks.
So also related to Venerable Kunga's question, because I have the text of the Brahma's Net Sutra from the ordination. And while the Brahma's Net Sutra Bodhisattva vows do appear in volume 5, I believe, it's quite short. And so then it looks quite similar to the Tibetan ones, as Rishika just brought up. But what Venerable Kunga might be recalling is one that says, the son of the Buddha must teach one and all how to receive and observe the Mahayana sutras and moral codes. He should teach the Mahayana. And then it says, if instead the disciple, with evil and hateful intentions, perversely teaches them the sutras and moral codes of the two vehicle traditions, as well as the commentaries of deluded externalists, he thereby commits a secondary offense. So it doesn't seem like it's saying you can never teach the fundamental vehicle, but here it specifically says, hateful intentions. So I would guess that's like wanting to deny people the Mahayana. So my guess is that's what she's remembering, but I interpret this as, again, if for whatever reason you don't want to share the Mahayana with people, kind of a sort of miserliness. It seems like that's what it's addressing.
Yeah, I haven't read that sutra before, so I don't know.
Well, she was saying that some of the stuff, I get what you're saying, like out of poor, bad intentions. But I don't know, I think something was mentioned about dharma that was not pure, but isn't that the clause of not teaching things that are non-dharma and making them seem like they're dharma? Is that?
I don't know, I'd have to look at the sutra.
Okay.
I haven't read that before, so, yeah. Okay, so let's continue. Next section, top of page 229. So this is how to train in the conduct after generating the mind. And it took me a while to find where this outline point came from, and I had to look way back on page 190. So that's right at the beginning of the section entering the great vehicle. So at the bottom of page 190, it says there are 3 points concerning the training of the mind in the, it says states, but it should be stages. Stages of the path of persons of great capacity. 1, how generating the mind of enlightenment is the only gateway to the Mahayana. 2, how to generate that mind. And 3, how to train in the conduct after generating that mind. So we've completed the first 2 of those 3 points. And now we have the third point, which, okay, after generating bodhicitta, how to train in the conduct, like the deeds. Sometimes it's translated as deeds, the bodhisattva deeds. And so this has 3 points. First, the reason it is necessary to train in the precepts after generating bodhicitta. 2, demonstrating that Buddhahood is not achieved by training in method or wisdom alone. And 3, explaining the actual stages of training in the precepts. And I was wondering, the term that's translated here as precepts, sometimes we use the word precept for like a vow. You know, we talk about our precepts, our pratimoksha precepts, our bodhisattva precepts, but it's not that word. It's more what's normally translated as training. Yeah, so the trainings. So when you see precepts here, you can think trainings. Okay, first, the reason it is necessary to train in the precepts after generating bodhicitta, according to the above scriptural passage from the life of Maitreya, and I had to look for that one as well, that's back on page 191. Even if you do not train in the precepts of generosity and so forth after generating aspiring bodhicitta in this manner, it will still be of great benefit. So that quote from Life of Maitreya is talking about how if you have generated bodhicitta, even without effort, meaning, you know, making effort to practice generosity and so forth, it's still incredibly beneficial and precious, like a sliver of diamond. You know, even a tiny fragment of a diamond is still incredibly precious, even more than gold. So in a similar way, just a little bit of bodhicitta, even if you're not actually practicing the perfections, it's still very beneficial. So this is true, Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, yes, this is true. However, if you do not make the bodhisattva precepts your essential practice, it will be impossible to become a Buddha. So even though it's beneficial to have bodhicitta, but if you want to become a Buddha, you want to go all the way to Buddhahood, full enlightenment, you have to engage in the bodhisattva precepts, meaning bodhisattva trainings, which, you know, is mainly the 6 perfections, but also, yeah, keeping bodhisattva vows. Therefore, you should train in the conduct. The King of Concentration's Sutra says, one should make it the essential practice. Why? Because, O youthful one, it will not be difficult for one who makes it his essential practice to obtain unsurpassed, perfectly complete enlightenment. Also, Kamalashila says in the first stages of meditation, a bodhisattva who has generated the mind understands that he cannot tame others without taming himself, and thoroughly applies himself to the practice of generosity and so forth. Without the practice, he cannot achieve enlightenment. Once the vow, here it is vow, dompa in Tibetan, once the vow has been taken, you must practice training in those very precepts associated with it. So the point here is that, yeah, we need to, it's not enough just to have the wish to become enlightened. Of course, that's very good to have, but that's like having the wish to go somewhere, right? Like, I'd like to go to India, but then you just sit around and you don't actually do anything to get yourself there. So, yeah, we have to do things to get ourselves to enlightenment. We have to engage in creating the causes, doing the practices, and that's what we're about to look at now, the 6 perfections. Okay, then that's it for that point. Okay, this next point is rather lengthy, demonstrating that Buddhahood is not achieved by training in method or wisdom alone. So basically, we need both method and wisdom to become a Buddha. So these are compared to the 2 wings of a bird, just as a bird can't fly if it has only 1 wing. In the same way, we can't reach enlightenment if we have only one of the 2, method or wisdom alone. The second stages of meditation, this is Kamala Shila's text, says, one who engages in the method for accomplishing Buddhahood needs an unmistaken method. For however hard you try, a mistaken path will not bring about the desired result, like yanking a cow's horn to get milk. It's a very good analogy. Hey, you're pulling at the wrong place. And then if it is faultless but incomplete, the result will not come about despite your effort, just as a sprout will not grow if the seed, water, earth, or the like is missing. Okay, so we need an unmistaken method, a correct method, but we also need a complete method. Otherwise, we won't reach Buddhahood. Well then, what are the complete and unmistaken causes and conditions? Vairocana's Manifest Enlightenment says, O Lord of Secrets, the wisdom of omniscience arises from the root that is compassion. It arises from the cause that is bodhicitta. It is concluded by method. In this regard, compassion has already been explained, so that's wishing all beings to be free of suffering. And then bodhicitta is both conventional bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta. So conventional bodhicitta, the wish to be a Buddha, to benefit all beings. And then ultimate bodhicitta is the realization of emptiness in the mind of a bodhisattva. So it's, with the motivation of bodhicitta, having the wisdom realizing emptiness. And then method is thoroughly complete generosity and so forth, the perfections. This was explained by the great trailblazer Kamala Shila. Oh, now we get into Hashang. Okay. So one erroneous conception regarding the path is upheld by the Chinese. Here it says Heishang, but the Chinese is, what is it, Hoshang? Hoshang, okay. And that means, it just means monk, I think? Abbot. And then there's another term, Mohayan or something, which means Mahayana. So, yeah, but anyway, the Tibetans call him Hashang or Heishang. And others who say, as long as they are discursive thoughts, even if they are good conceptions, to say nothing of bad conceptions, they bind us in cyclic existence. Therefore, their effects do not transcend cyclic existence, just as one can be bound with fetters of gold or ropes, just as both white and black clouds obscure the sky, and just as pain is produced whether one is bitten by a white or a black dog. That is why just equipoise without conceptions about anything is the path to Buddhahood. Generosity, ethics, and so forth were taught for the sake of immature beings incapable of meditating on this definitive meaning. Therefore, having found the definitive meaning, to engage in that conduct is like a king becoming a commoner, or like tracking an elephant's footprints after you have found the elephant. So, yeah, there's a lot of controversy about this whole story. Yeah, Geshe Zopa in his commentary goes into some of it, because what is said in Tibetan history books, history accounts, may not be 100% accurate. There's the Chinese version of the story, I guess. So scholars like Jose Cabezon and Luis Gomez, so they've sort of looked into the, history and scriptures and so on, and have written books even, or articles about this whole thing. So I think one thing is some people have the idea that Hashang was teaching Zen. What he was teaching was actually Zen Buddhism. But Geshe Zopa says Zen is much more profound than that. And also, I guess there's different traditions of Zen. I looked it up, Wikipedia, and it said he was from the northern school or the eastern school of Zen. So there, even within Zen, there's different traditions. Is that right? I haven't really studied Zen, but... and then also Geshe Zopa said it's also possible that the Tibetans, who were disciples of Hashang, misunderstood what he was teaching and kind of distorted it, and then these distortions got carried down. So we don't really know. We don't really know what the story was, because this is 8th century Tibet. And but anyway, whether it was really Hashang's views or not, or they were distorted by the Tibetans, basically what the story is that he was teaching that conceptual thought causes us to create karma, both the virtuous and non-virtuous karma, and that keeps us in samsara, which is actually true, right? Even when we're creating good karma, but as long as our mind is still under the influence of ignorance, not understanding emptiness, we still see things as inherently existing, even the good karma we create is still the cause for us to stay in samsara. So that's actually true. And he also talked about our pure original mind, which is called clear light, and any thoughts that we have pollute our original pure mind, this clear light mind. And this original mind is without any perception or object, and itself is the wisdom realizing emptiness, right? So if we can just get into that state of mind, of that pure original mind, then that's the realization of emptiness. So when it manifests, we have the perfect realization of emptiness. So this is what we need to do, is to stop all thoughts. Just stop all thoughts altogether and just sit there and do nothing. Really, that's what he taught. Think nothing and do nothing. And so, the way to Buddhahood is to not do practices like generosity. And like it says here, his view was that, okay, yeah, Buddha did teach generosity and ethics and so on, but those are for kind of more inferior disciples who aren't capable of this higher form of meditation. And so if you are able to do this higher form of meditation, then just do that and don't bother about generosity, ethics, and so on, because those involve thought. You're thinking. And anytime you're thinking, you're creating the cause to stay in samsara, blocking your path to enlightenment. So Geshe Zopa says people in 8th century Tibet were attracted to this practice because it was easy. You didn't have to study all these texts and learn debating and logic and everything. And you quickly get a good feeling. You feel very peaceful when you do this practice. But the king was worried because, this kind of practice was very different than the practices that were coming from India, like Shantarakshita, Kamalashila. So the king arranged this debate between Hashang and Kamalashila, and both of them were able to quote many scriptures, many sutras. As it says here, the next paragraph says, Hashang substantiates his position by quoting 80 passages from sutras that praise non-conceptuality. So there are actually passages in sutras that talk about this. Yeah, he wasn't just inventing it. It sounds like he was actually quite a great scholar. But Kamalashila also was able to quote from many sutras and scriptures to prove his point. And so the outcome, according to Tibetan sources, is that Kamalashila won the debate. I guess it was the king who decided who won. So the king decided Kamalashila won, and Hashang was sent away. He was sent back to China. But apparently the Chinese have another version of the story. I don't know. So we don't know for sure. Anyway, and then Kamalashila wrote his text, Stages of Meditation, to show that both method and wisdom are necessary to attain enlightenment. He says, if you just stop all thoughts, don't think about anything, you lose the method side of the path, which is all about generating love and compassion and bodhicitta, practicing generosity, ethics, and so on. So that whole side of the path is lost. But Geshe Zopa says you also lose the wisdom side of the path, because without thinking, you can't realize emptiness. You don't realize emptiness just by not thinking, just stopping all your thoughts. You have to use analytical thought to realize emptiness, get an inferential realization of emptiness, and then further meditation on that, it will become a direct, non-conceptual realization of emptiness. So if you just stop thinking altogether, you don't have either side of the path. You don't have the method side, you don't have the wisdom side. And it seems that Hashang's view was still around at Lama Tsongkhapa's time, which is why he's spending so much time talking about it. He was talking to his contemporaries who were still being influenced. And I actually remember reading somewhere that Lama Tsongkhapa himself learned this meditation and practiced this meditation and found it really nice. But then he started feeling, wait a minute, something isn't right here. I could be wrong about that, but I read that somewhere. So at Lama Tsongkhapa's time, according to Geshe Zopa, there were people who who were influenced by this view, and they didn't see any point in taking vows, keeping ethical discipline, creating virtue. They were not interested in doing any of those things. They just want to sit there and do nothing. And so that's why Lama Tsongkhapa is talking so much about this. And Geshe Zopa said also these kind of views still exist today. There's some people who don't like to study, who reject study, analysis, conceptual thought, any conception. I've heard that, yeah? Any conception, any kind of conception, stop. It's wrong, it's bad, it's diluted, it's obscuring you from enlightenment, from the true nature of things. So there's that kind of view around today. Yeah. So yeah, if you're really interested in this, you can read Geshe Zopa's explanation. It's goes into a lot more detail and gives reasons why why these views are wrong. Not just saying they're wrong, but why they are wrong. Why following this kind of practice will not lead to enlightenment. Anyway, so we'll continue with this interesting point next week. Any questions before we finish? Comments from Kunga?
I found the precept in Brahma's Net Sutra that addresses this. It's not the one that she read, It's number 24, and it sounds very similar to what we just heard in this Lamrim text. So if the son of the Buddha fails to study Mahayana sutras and moral codes assiduously and cultivate correct views, correct nature, and the correct Dharmakaya, it is like abandoning the 7 precious jewels for mere stones, which are worldly texts and the 2 vehicle or externalist commentaries. To do so is to create the causes and conditions that obstruct the path to enlightenment and cut himself off from his Buddha nature. It is a failure to follow the bodhisattva path. If a disciple intentionally acts in this manner, he commits a secondary offense. So here it doesn't mention the intention of evil or hatred views or whatever was mentioned in that other one. It's just saying flatly, yeah, you need to teach the Mahayana Sutras.
Teach or practice?
Study.
Study and practice, because we have, we have similar vows, precepts in the secondary precepts. Yeah, we shouldn't abandon Mahayana. I thought there's one about, not mainly following, like spending more time studying fundamental vehicle texts than Mahayana texts. Where's that one? Yeah, first one is abandoning the scriptures of the fundamental as not enough exerting effort. No, I don't see. But that says another system of practice. Neglect, yeah, I guess that could include fundamental vehicle. It could include other religions as well. So kind of neglecting studying the Mahayana and practicing the Mahayana and putting more effort into some other system. Anyway, we can look into that more before next week. So let's dedicate the merit, the positive energy, sharing it with all sentient beings and dedicating it for enlightenment for all beings.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lu Sang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May the born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Oh, thank you for whoever did the review classes.